What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next I'm going to talk about the top 10 surprising sales I saw last week. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I haven't done one of my top 10 videos in a little while. I want to get back into doing them regularly. So what I do, if you haven't watched one of these before, is I watch the weekly Heritage comic auction, and I pick 10 books, 5 that surprised me on the upside and 5 that surprised me on the downside. So I'm not just talking about top 10 high sales, I'm talking about both high and low sales. When I go through them, I alternate between the high and low sales. All right, so with that, let's get into those sales. And the first one, number 10, is a high sale. This is Showcase number 79 with a CGC 9.4, selling for a record $1,740. Now this just barely set a new record, but it did. New record by just $40 over the prior record of $1,700. This is the first appearance of Dolphin, and I think this is just one of the coolest looking covers from DC in the Silver Age. I love the green. I think it looks incredible. It's also, it's like I said, it's a first appearance. Now it's not a major character or anything. Dolphin is, kind of a minor character, but it's possible they could end up incorporating that character in some way into something with Aquaman in the future. No idea, but just a possibility. But I think this is just one where people like to buy this book because the cover just looks so incredible. And especially when it's in high grade. When it's a high grade copy with minimal creasing, looks really, really good just because of that relatively solid green background. Now, this book has always been in demand just because of the cool cover, but prices have definitely been picking up over the last 6 to 8 months, along with everything else. A 9.4, it's a high grade copy, top 11% of copies out there. There are only 16 graded higher, and there is one in a 9.8, so there is a really high grade 9.8 copy out there. I had estimated the price of this book at $1,320, and this was 32% above that estimate. Prior high was $1,700, like I said, but that was all the way back in 2018. It had been selling much lower recently. It had been down around $1,320 in March. So this was a record by just $40, but it was a pretty big jump from earlier this year, a little over 30%. Now, this is always a tough book to estimate what it's going to sell for because, like I mentioned, it's not really purchased because of the key character or some spec on the book. It's really purchased because of how cool that book looks, just the incredible cover. And so you can kind of get prices that are a little bit all over the place with it. But with this book, if you want a copy of it, you definitely can pick one up. You don't need alternatives. I would just find a lower grade copy. There are definitely plenty of raw copies that are available on places like eBay, so you can definitely pick them up there. But a 6.5 sold for $275 on June 13th, and a 4.0 sold for $175 on June 4th. So definitely a book that you can find that's affordable, about $100 to $200 if you're finding it raw, and just a few $100 if you're picking up that book for a nice mid-grade copy. But like I said, the thing I would really recommend looking for is a copy that has minimal creasing, because that really improves the appearance of that book. All right, so number 9, this is a low sale. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 20 with a CGC 8.0 selling for $2,400. Now, this is the first appearance of Scorpion. He's right on the cover, just a cool early Amazing Spider-Man cover. And this book has been on just a tear over the last 6 to 8 months, really going up in price. And it seems almost certain that we're going to see that character, at least in some capacity, in future Spider-Man movies, because we saw Matt Gargan in the earlier Spider-Man movie. He met with the Vulture, he was on the boat scene in that movie, so he's definitely a character that I would expect to see, whether it's going to be some type of suit or something where he's genetically engineered or whatever it might be, I don't know, but I do think it's very likely that we're going to see more of that character. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $3,000. This was 20% below that estimate. And the high sale, if you look at places like Go Collect, is $6,900. But you can basically ignore that number. That was a sale from the Steve Ditko collection, which all those books went for way more than normal universal graded copy prices. So if you see those sales numbers in there, if you see them on something like Go Collect or on GPA or whatever, ignore that number. that is not the number that you can expect to get for that book. And so that's why I had estimated the price at $3,000, because other than that, the high sale had been $3,200 back in April, and more recently had been going in the $2,700 to $3,000 range. So $2,400, pretty big drop from then. But I think this person probably got a good price because this is an early Amazing Spider-Man key, a character we very likely will see moving forward, and you can just never go wrong with high-grade copies of those books. I mean, an 8.0 is a really, really nice copy of this book, and so I think that was probably a great price that the person picked that book up at. Now, for alternatives, a great alternative for this book is Amazing Spider-Man number 19. This is actually the first appearance of Matt Gargan, and so that's the guy who becomes Scorpion. And so that's how you can get a book that has that character in a way, but not actually paying that huge premium for Scorpion. And for an example for how much cheaper that book is, a 7.5 sold for $595 on October 17th, and a 4.5 sold for $335 on October 22nd. So you can get that book for probably around 4 to 5 times less than what you would pay for his first appearance actually as Scorpion. All right, number 8, this is a high sale, and this one is not a big surprise, but it did move up a lot, and this is Marvel Premiere number 1 with a CGC 9.4 that sold for a record $3,000. And this is the first time that the character him is called Warlock, and it's one of the many first appearances that you have for that character because he has a really, really messy history in Marvel with the first appearances where you've got Fantastic Four 66, where you got him in the cocoon, Fantastic Four 67, which is the first time you see him out of the cocoon, Thor 165, which is the first time you see him as him, the first full appearance. And we recently had the announcement that the character had been cast, which is not a big shock because we know Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is coming, and we had the cocoon at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, but we had already had a big record in this book just a week ago when that announcement came out. That record was $2,035, and this beat that by almost 50%. So I had estimated the price at $2,000 based on that sale right when the announcement came out, but like I said, really beat that estimate, 50% above that estimate. Prior high had been $1,560, and that was back in August. So now this book has doubled in just a few months. So this is what I'm talking about when I have videos where I talk about what I call spec books, where I'm not buying dollar bin or really cheap books to spec on. When I buy spec books, I like buying major keys or big keys that have a lot of potential moving forward with a character that we know is coming, and the book just really hasn't moved all that much yet. And that's why I had made that video a few months ago about books to pick up for this character, which were Fantastic Four 67, Thor 165, and Marvel Premiere number 1. And those books have all seen big moves. Biggest moves I think have been in Thor 165, followed by Marvel Premiere 1, and then FF 67. But all of them have been relatively strong performers since that news came out. Now, for alternatives for this book, I personally wouldn't be picking up these books right now. This is when you've got all the heat on them, and this is when you're really going to see those prices spiking. And so Thor 165, Fantastic Four 66, 67, Warlock 1, Marvel Premiere 1, all these books that are known for kind of like key moments for that character, I would probably wait a little bit. Just wait and see. Prices will probably calm down because it's going to be a little while still before we actually see that character in costume, get a trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, all of that. And so I would expect we're going to see a decline in prices after this initial spike, and then we're going to see another spike in prices when that trailer comes out. And so I would just wait until prices have pulled back some, pick that book up, and then if you want to sell it or whatever, I would wait until the trailer. All right, number 7, it's a low sale. This is XMen 94 with a CGC 6.0 that sold for $780. And XMen, it keeps continuing its slide for the most part. In most books, it just keeps dropping for these keys. And this is the first appearance of the new X-Men in their main title. Their first appearance is in Giant Size X-Men 1, but then this is the first time that they appear in their main title. And this book I talked about quite a few months ago. It went up more than any other book that I was tracking. X-Men 94 jumped like 300 or 350%, just massive moves for this book. Now, personally, I think it had been way undervalued for a long time, so that's part of the reason why it went up so much, but now it is definitely coming back down some. Not to the prices it was at before, but coming back down. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $1,100. This was 29% below that estimate. The high was $2,000 on May 10th, so it's down 61% since that high. However, a year ago, this book was selling for about $350 to $400. So that's what I'm talking about with how much that book moved up. So a $400 book moving to $2,000, that is a 400% gain on that book over the course of that short period of time. So that's why it's not a huge shock that we're seeing this book pulled back, but it is still up from that $400 price. It's still up about 100%, but it has retreated quite a bit. So it definitely stings if you picked that book up at the peak or around the peak, having it come down now, but you have to look at it in the perspective of where this book is at compared to where it was. And I do think this is the time to start really looking at these books, to pick up these books, because if we get any type of announcement or news about the X-Men from Disney and Marvel, fully expect the prices of these books to go right back up to where they were. And so this is the time that you really need to start thinking about picking up those books. Having a 60% decrease in price from its peak, I mean, I don't think you can really go wrong buying those books at that point. Now, I feel this way about a number of books that have taken slides recently, especially ones related to the X-Men. This includes X-Men 94, Giant Size X-Men 1, X-Men number 1, Hulk 181. All of those books moved up a lot earlier this year and have all come back down quite a bit, and all just major keys, very in-demand books, and books that when we do eventually get those characters showing up in the MCU, they are all going to go up a lot. And so definitely, if you are interested in picking up those books, now really is the time to start looking. Okay, so now number 6, and this is a high sale. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 1 with a CGC 2.0 that sold for a record $13,200. Now, as Amazing Fantasy 15 has been hitting new highs, it really isn't a surprise that Amazing Spider-Man 1 has been moving up with it. You really do think about those two books largely together. Now, I have a 0.5 of that book, so this is my copy, and I really like this copy because it's a 0.5, but it's complete. Spine of the cover completely split, reattached with tape, and so it's complete. You know, obviously it's a low grade, but it's not missing any big pieces that impact the main picture on here. So that's one of the reasons I really like this copy. But man, at these prices, I'm even considering, and that is probably my favorite book that I own, and I'm even considering looking at selling that book, because I think that the prices in Amazing Fantasy 15 and Amazing Spider-Man number 1, they're feeling like what we saw earlier this year. Those two books really hadn't moved as much as a lot of the other keys did earlier this year, and I feel like we're kind of seeing a delayed reaction with this book. And so we're seeing all this, this FOMO, fear of missing out, people that really want to get that copy, and so every time one comes up for sale, they're bidding them up and they're paying these record prices. And that's if you're looking to sell books, that's kind of the time to sell that book. And so if I was an owner of an AF-15, I would be selling my AF-15 right now. And as an owner of Amazing Spider-Man number 1, I am seriously considering selling that book and waiting to see what happens and potentially trying to buy one back later. So that's just my opinion on what I'm seeing with some of these what seem like very aggressive buying on these books right now. And so just something to be cautious of if you are in the market for those books. It's always possible that the books can just keep going up. I mean, that's definitely a thing that could happen, and then I wouldn't be able to pick up, a copy, or I'd have to pay a lot more for it. But this just does feel a lot like earlier this year, and so it's very possible, I think, that we could see these prices decline again over the next few months. Now, back to Amazing Spider-Man number 1, this 2.0. The prior record for this book was $7,000 from March of this year. Now, that was a while ago. There have been higher sales more recently, but A 1.0 had sold for $4,000 on October 15th, even though I questioned that sale a little bit. I don't know how real that sale was. A 2.5 though did sell for $7,000 on August 31st. And so I had estimated a price of $8,500 based on some other sales that I had seen. And this was 55% above that estimate. I mean, just a massive sale. Over $6,000 per grade point for this book. But as I said, it is something that I'm definitely a little wary of right now. Just I think all the excitement and action around Amazing Spider-Man 1, Amazing Fantasy 15 is a little, we call it frothy right now, a little crazy right now. And so I am considering selling my copy, even though I thought I wouldn't ever say that. So just something that you may want to think about if you own copies of those books or if you're looking to pick up copies of those books. All right, now number 5, and this was a low sale. This is Savage Tales number 1 with a CGC 8.5 selling for $1,140. And I will refrain from making jokes while I talk about this book. But this is the first appearance of Man-Thing. It's also a pretty cool Conan cover. And the Man-Thing key issues have really been on a tear as well recently. Marvel has been introducing that character more in their regular comic storylines, and so there's speculation that because they're doing that, they're planning on introducing that character in some capacity into the MCU, whether it's something on Disney Plus or in a movie or whatever it might be. No idea, but that's, I think, one of the big drivers on the speculation side on why these books have been moving up a lot recently. Because yes, this is a low sale, but these books in general have been moving up. Now, the record for this book was $1,400. That was in March of this year. But based on the recent sales, these big sales like I'd been seeing, I had estimated it was going to go for $1,600. So this was 29% below my estimate. And I do think this is a good book to spec on right now, these types of books from Man-Thing, but this is an expensive spec. I mean, when you're spending $1,000+ on a book, that is an expensive spec for something that we really don't know if that character is going to be coming in any capacity to the MCU or to Disney Plus. Especially when this book a year ago in this grade was going for about $400 to $500. So even at this reduced price, it's up over 100%. It's also a magazine-sized book if you're not familiar with it, and so it's a larger book, which some people just don't like. Some people would rather have something that's the comic size, just for storage and display, all of that. Now, there are a lot of great alternatives if you want to pick up books for this character. And so Fear number 10 is one great one. This is the first solo story for Man-Thing. The cover says Adventure into Fear, but if you look this book up on Go Collector or wherever else, it's always under just Fear. And so you just look up Fear number 10, you find that book. A 7.0 sold for $100 and a 7.5 sold for $125 in September. So much more affordable book, a lot less risk that you're putting into it with a $1,000 book that could be cut in half, whereas here you've got a $100 or $200 book that could be cut in half. So if you potentially are out, $50 versus $500, that's just a different way that you could buy books related to this character and not take quite as much risk. Now, another good option is Man-Thing number 1, and specifically the first series. I prefer the first series over his second series. An 8.5 sold for $195 on October 16th, and a 9.6, so really high grade, sold for just $601 on September 2nd. So books that, even in really high grades, nice copies, aren't going to cost all that much. But if you see that character show up, those are the types of books that will also move. You'll have the first appearance in Savage Tales number 1, first solo story in Fear number 10, and first solo title in Man-Thing number 1. So all great books to pick up if you want to try to speculate on this character. All right, number 4, and this is a high sale. Jumping back into the golden age for this one, this is Zoot Comics number 11. With a CGC 5.5 selling for a record $2,226. Now, this is a Golden Age book that has a lot going for it on the cover in terms of what a lot of Golden Age collectors are trying to pick up. You've got a bondage cover, you've got a Good Girl art cover, it's done by Jack Kamen, and it has Matt Baker interior art. And the Jack Kamen, Matt Baker combinations are always just incredible books if you're looking for Good Girl art type books. Now, this book hasn't sold in this grade before, so it's a record regardless of what happened, but it was still a very big sale compared to other sales around that book. So a 5.0, for example, sold for $1,140 in May. This is almost 100% above that 5.0 sale at a 5.5. So big sale for that. I had estimated the book as selling at $1,250 based on that 5.0 sale. This beat that estimate by 78%. So just crushed that estimate. And this is what I've been talking about with these Golden Age books. There are certain types of books that have been on average really, really strong. It's these good girl art covers, these pre-code horror covers, the superhero covers, especially for Marvel, have just been really, really strong for the last few months that I've seen. Now, there are tons of great alternatives for this book if you want to get into this type of book. There's Rula the Jungle Goddess, there's Jungle Comics, JoJo Comics, Fight Comics. Lots of them are very affordable, especially as you get up into the higher numbers in the runs. And you can get some really high grade copies, especially in things like Jungle Comics, for pretty affordable prices. So great options if you're looking to get into this type of content, these types of books, without spending the thousands of dollars that often come with books that are done by Matt Baker and Jack Kamen. All right, now number 3, this is a low sale. This is one I was surprised to see pop up on my list, which is why it is number 3 here. And this is Marvel Spotlight number 5 with a CGC 5.0 that sold for $1,110. This is the first appearance of Ghost Rider, just an extremely hot, in-demand book, and I think it's likely this person just got an incredible deal on this book. I think I may have bid on this one, but I had bought some other things, which you will see in a future unboxing, that I didn't want to spend another $1,000. And so I did not end up bidding any more on this book, but still think this is probably just a great price that this person got, because this book has been in so much demand, and I had estimated the price at $1,600. This was 31% below that estimate, and the high was actually $1,900 back on June 11th, so quite a bit down from that high earlier this year. Now, one thing I do want to point out, that while I am a big proponent of the pricing consolidation sites like Go Collect, Cover Price, GPA, that kind of thing, I do want to point out that sometimes if a sale doesn't look quite right to you, you do need to go and check that sale out. One example is that on Go Collect for this book, there is a $2,500 sale on September 24th. But I use eBay's TerraPeak sales tool. You can actually validate what those books sold for, and it actually sold for $1,200. So I've reported that to Go Collect. They may have fixed it by now. If they fixed it, I don't know. But that's just one of those things to be wary of, that if you see something that looks out of line, it's usually worthwhile to spend a little more time checking into it. Now, since I am talking about Go Collect a little bit right now, they did an update recently, and if anybody from Go Collect watches my channel, that update is not good. I do not like it. It has made pricing books for me extremely time consuming in comparison to what it was before. Say it's about doubled the amount of time it takes for me to price books. So they added a lot of extra stuff to it that slowed things down. There's a lot of issues I've noticed with prices where things are buggy, where prices are missing, where you see them in one place but they aren't showing up in other places. Lots of little issues that I'm seeing with that update that I cannot recommend with what's going on with that site right now. So just, it'd be nice if somebody from Go Collect watched this, but it would be great if those things could be addressed, because it has been very frustrating to use that tool over the last couple weeks since that update. But back to the sales. To give an idea where this book was a year ago, it was at about $650. So even at $1,100, it's up a lot from there. It was up 200%, up at that $1,900 in June. So we are seeing a retreat in these prices, but I always just want to put that into perspective, that prices, yes, have been coming down from the highs, but they still aren't anywhere near where they were. We are generally seeing prices level off above, quite a bit above where they were a year ago. Now, for alternatives for this book, one of the normal ones most people would talk about would be Ghost Rider #1. Similar cover, very popular book, but I think one that gets overlooked a lot is Marvel Spotlight #6. And I think it's because it's the kind of like a blue cover. It's not as popular or sharp of looking of a cover, but it is his second appearance, and from what I've generally seen with second appearances, if the first appearances are moving up in price, second appearances also move up in price with it. So they are generally more affordable options to buy books for that character that are also going to move with the first appearance, and you don't have to put down, thousands of dollars or many hundreds of dollars. So for example, a 7.0 sold on October 8th for $300, and an 8.5 sold for $500 on October 14th. So you can get this book for about 10 times less than what the first appearance costs, which is what I normally see with second appearances. Generally, the rule of thumb I've noticed is that about 10 times less for that second appearance versus the first appearance. All right, so now we are getting into the top 2 sales. This is number 2. It is the most surprising high sale that I saw, and this is Crime Suspense Stories number 16, with a CGC 5.0 selling for a record $780. Now, there are a number of very in-demand books from the Crime Suspense Stories run. One of my favorite books that I own is one of those, and that is Crime Suspense Stories number 22. So I had shown this book as one of the books in my top 20 horror books, and just awesome book, especially for the Halloween time of year, but just a crazy cover from Johnny Craig. But Crime Suspense Stories 16 is another really cool Johnny Craig cover, and I feel like it's one that's been relatively overlooked for a long time. It's just a crazy cover, really great coloring on it, just the look on the guy's face, and I think that this one is finally starting to get a little more attention because I've seen it sell a few times over the last month or so, and it's been hitting some pretty good numbers, including this one. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $425, and a 5.5 sold just the week prior for $456. So this beat my estimate by 84%. And just to give an idea about the movement and the prices of these books, the prior record for this book was from 2018, and that was a sale of just $228. So that's a jump of 242% in just 3 years. So that is a significant gain. And again, like I've mentioned earlier, that's the type of move I'm seeing in a lot of these Golden Age books, these pre-code horror books, good girl art books, the superhero books, just lots of moves in these prices. And part of that, I think, is because there's not a ton of these books out there. Now, EC, there are more than others, but for a lot of these books, there's not a ton of them out there, and it doesn't take very much of an increase in demand to really move the price in the books, just because if there's only one that sells every month or a few months, there's going to be a lot of bidders out there looking for those books. And that's part of the reason why I like to talk about these Golden Age books as well, beyond just the silver and bronze modern type records, because that's where I'm really seeing the strength in the comic market right now. So it's the type of thing that if you just happen to come across a raw copy somewhere, seems like a good price, it's worthwhile to start picking up those books. And my general rule of thumb that I follow is, if I think a cover looks cool, if I think it's got some crazy content on it, whether it's like the Crime Suspense Stories 22 with the beheading, or this one with this crazy guy in the cover, or skulls, or whatever it might be, other people probably think it's cool too. And so those are the types of books to really start looking for, and where you can potentially find some undervalued books from that time period. And that's what I also recommend for alternatives. I mean, there are a lot of EC titles. There's a lot of different types of content within those titles. There's lots of other publishers as well, like Avon and Harvey. So plenty of places where you can find books with this type of content, and all kinds of price ranges. Some that will cost you thousands of dollars for that book, and other ones where you can get them for under hundreds. So just keep your eyes open and just look for that cover content that's cool, because like I said, that just means that other people will probably feel the same way. All right, now number 1, and this is the most surprising low sale that I saw, and this was Fantastic Four number 50 with a CGC 7.5 selling for $1,140. Now, this is the third part of the Galactus and Silver Surfer story, second full appearance of Galactus, third appearance of Silver Surfer, first Silver Surfer solo cover. So it's a big book too, not as big as 48 and 49, but still an important book. Cover isn't everyone's favorite. It's got kind of a weird brown background, but I like the way that Silver Surfer contrasts with that back cover. I wish it didn't have that little block down in the corner with Johnny going to college. I think that really takes away from the cover. It would be better if it was kind of more of a solid background cover, but still, whatever. Now, this book had been selling for around $1,800. There was an $1,800 sale on September 21st, which is the record. There's a $1,782 sale on September 2nd and a $1,750 sale on August 30th. And based on those sales, I estimated the price $1,750. This was 35% below that estimate. Now, we had seen Fantastic Four 48 and 49 move up earlier this year. Those two books moved before Fantastic Four 50 moved. And we saw them move up, we've seen them come back down, and now they're leveling off and even starting to come up a little bit again. And those books dropped about 30% or so from their peaks, and this is just around 30%, 35% from its peak. So it's possible or probable that this is a good pickup for that book, and that we could very well start to see those prices really level off around here or even turn around. Now, I think it's kind of funny how predictable this has ended up being, because we've seen this happen over the course of this year, where there were books that moved earliest, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, XMen. Those are the books that moved first, and they started coming back down first. Then we had other books that started to move up, like Fantastic Four 48 and 49. Then they started to come back down. Then you have this book, Fantastic Four 50, spiked. Everybody, wanted to buy it. Then it came back down. And that's what I'm talking about with what I was saying earlier about Amazing Fantasy 15 and Amazing Spider-Man #1. It is following the same trend. They didn't move like the other books earlier this year. They're moving up now. So just be cautious with that, because it is very likely, I think, that you will see a retraction in those prices again, like we saw with every other book that we've seen this year, where they went through a huge spike and then pulled back. And they've happened over the course of the year. It's not all at the same time, but it seems to be a very repeatable event. So just something to watch out for with that. Now, alternatives for this book, there are a ton of great alternatives for, just awesome Silver Surfer covers. One is Tales to Astonish number 93. It's just a great Silver Surfer Hulk cover. It's also kind of a weird colored background. It's kind of a muddy brown red type color, but it's got cool flames on the cover. I really like how Silver Surfer's eyes look on that depiction. I think they just look awesome. And that book, much more affordable. 7.0 sold for $330 on October 25th. So definitely a book where it's a few $100s instead of getting into the thousands. And another book that I really like, and I have a copy of this one, is Fantastic Four number 55. And this is the fourth appearance of Silver Surfer. And it's this purple cover, which I really like purple covers. And it's, him battling the Thing, just a really cool cover, much more affordable, especially in mid-grades. A 5.0 sold for $180 on October 17th, and a 7.5 sold for $275 on October 15th. But this is a book that, with this solid type background, looks really, really sharp when you get one that doesn't have the creases in it. And so that's definitely what I would recommend if you're looking to pick up a copy of this. You don't have to go for something really high grade in the 9s. I mean, it's from 1966. Those are very high grade copies, but you can get books in the high 6s or the 7s that have minimal or no creasing on the cover. And that's the type of book that I would definitely go for if you're looking for a book that's affordable but presents really well. All right, so those were the top 10 surprising sales that I saw this week, as well as my little rant about Go Collect and their recent update. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button right here if you'd like to subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.